Well, sitting here with Dan, and as I finished my other video, I began talking about the Ontario buckets. Last week, we had a lot of people asking Anthony, what are we doing for Ontario? So Ontario is a different animal. We have the windback sale. If you want to go to the sale too and go out and look at, there's a sale tomorrow. Yeah, there's a yearling sale. We can go and look at some of them. I know that Danny was going to look at them. Mario had looked at some of them. They gave me numbers that they liked. Yeah. It's a little watered down sale. It's only windback, but it is what it is. We'll go out and have a look. So we have the windback sale. We have the seal stir. We have Lexington horses, Ontario horses selling at Lexington. We have Ontario horses selling at Harrisburg. It's not like Ohio, right? So how do we do that? So I just said make it the easiest possible. One, it has to be in Canadian funds because most of the horses are bought in Canada. So it's not like Lexington that was in U.S. funds. This is Canadian funds. Secondly, it can't be relegated to one sale. So we're going to leave the bucket open. We're going to leave it open, allow people to buy into it. As we buy horses at Windback, it has to be closed for 2 or 3 days as we allow people to buy shares that own the bucket. That's you guys know that. And so on and so forth. Lexington, Dan and I were talking last night. Now, this is an exciting year for a number of reasons. One, we've had a great year. Two, we've had a lot of great horses. We've taken a lot of exposure. And a lot of people have messaged me wanting to get involved. Now, Dan had just retired. He's super old.
Thanks.
and he wanted to come over. I take great pride in what I do. Now, Daniel had me come over and speak in Australia about how we do things, but what's lost on horse people, and I have to spend at least some of today writing a blog for Standardbred Canada. If you could get this blog actually published in Australia, it would make sense, because what people don't understand is when we're in Ontario and we see problems in Ontario, we believe these are Ontario problems. They aren't. They're the same problems you guys have, the same problems I see in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. All week they made a point to tell everybody in Ohio that there wasn't a horse shortage. It's wonderful to say the house isn't on fire, but when I smell smoke, it's coming from somewhere. And there is a horse shortage everywhere, right? Every single place in North America. And that is directly because of a lack of demand. Now, you can say some of that's from the pandemic, but the reality of the situation is a lot of these shortages are coming from owner shortages, right?
That's right.
Less people to buy horses, less demand for horses, less horses being bred, less horses to race, so on and so forth. Now, the next shortage, the next wave that's going to come, and I see it happening right in front of my eyes before anybody else does, and I'll tell you how in a second, is trainer shortages. Now, I've had no less than 12 trainers in the last 2-3 months call me and ask me either for a job or how to start fractional ownership stables and how they could do it, what their first steps were. One gentleman is in dire straits virtually. He said, listen, if I can't get moving, I have to go drive a truck or something. I can't be a trainer anymore. Once those people leave the industry and realize that there is 9-to-5 work out there where you don't have to pay extraordinary bills and you can actually earn a paycheck, it's hard to get them back in because they're scared, as they should be, right? So when we start losing trainers, we're not going to be able to replace them. You see these shortages happening, and it's not going to stop until we address what I believe, and I think rational people would agree, is the core of this. It's simple: supply and demand caused by a lack of ownership, a lack of participation from owners in the industry, and a lack of owners in the industry. So what you'll find, and I did this when I was with you, is I go off on a tangent. We were about to talk about the Ontario buckets, and somehow now we're talking about ownership shortages. So I believe what I was trying.
You are Anthony McDonald.
Yeah. So I believe what I was trying to say was, originally, is that we've had a lot of exciting things happen in the stable. And people are starting to take notice. And Daniel likes trotters, but he's a pacer guy also. We have a number of other clients. You'll notice why we bought Cowboy by the Sea. We have a number of people that were interested. And I actually feel bad when you looked at me and said I would have bought into that horse. I actually felt bad just for a second. I mean, I'm fine now, but we will likely buy a rather expensive pacer. And the reason I say rather expensive, it isn't saying that the horse will be rather expensive, but it will be a well-bred horse, which in turn demands a pretty decent amount of money. I know there's some of you out there that have gone to the dark side and are now trotting people because of me, and I like that. I like pacers, I like trotters, but there's just something about having a very gifted trotter that is gratifying and satisfying to somebody that develops young horses, right? And I guess the same could be said by a pacer. You know, but this year especially, I took it a little personally. Somebody said, well, you guys don't train pacers. We choose not to train pacers. At the time, I mean, when you buy Victor Cruz for $14,000 in Ohio, there's only so many paths Victor Cruz can go down, and one of them isn't the Metro Pace. Exactly so right. If you want to have quality pacers, buy quality pacers. What we bought was very affordable, value-based pacers, which are here, and then you have horses that are much more high risk. Yep. But Daniel knows the risk, and a number of other people do, and that's the beauty of the stable, is that we've allowed people to see all the highs and lows, ins and outs, you know, all the places you can walk and all the places that maybe you shouldn't walk in horse racing. And, you know, buying an expensive bred pacer is a risky proposition for anybody. But if there is a demand, we just talked about supply and demand, if there is a demand for that, and there is, because I know there's 3 or 4, counting you, larger clients out there that want to buy a pacer. And, you know, this is important. I told everybody when we had the Ohio buckets and people saw Lexington selling out and Ohio was close to selling out, everybody's like, well, I'm not going to get my horse. And you are, right? And if it wasn't for people like Daniel and other people that have seen what we do and want to be involved with the stable, we couldn't go out and buy a Cowboy by the Sea. And there were some of you that are bread and butter clients, the people that got involved from the general public that are very value-based people, much like I am. And quite frankly, without the ability to have people like Daniel and other people buy those horses, we too wouldn't be allowed to play along, right? So we likely will be buying a pacer or so, maybe 2, that is going to end up being a little more pricey. That will happen every time I'm doing a video, by the way, every single time, multiple times, and we'll move on. So that brings us to the Ontario bucket, because as I said to Daniel, Jesus, as I said to Daniel, there are a number of good-looking Bettor's Delights on day one. Now, we haven't had a ton of luck with Bettor's Delight. The problem, and it's funny you said this yesterday, the problem with Bettor's Delights is they all look great, but some of them aren't. And you don't know until you get to the track. So you train them down, and you're like, oh my God, I got a nice Bettor's Delight. And then you get to the track, and you're like, I have a Bettor's Delight. and that's the way, but that's racing in a nutshell. So there's a number of horses we're looking at, and some of them are for Ontario. Now, that particular horse likely won't win a bucket, but I've earmarked a number of very, very interesting looking Ontario breds in Lexington, especially. I've just started going through the catalog for Harrisburg quietly. Again, a number of good-looking Ontario breds. Here's my catalog. I took it in. I got the sale catalog downloaded, and I had the sale catalog in hand for London. Number of good-looking horses in it. So we have this wide swath of where we can, where we will, likely, buy horses for Ontario. So having it just set up for one sale is not going to help, right? So we set it up for, as the Ontario buckets, those will be Ontario horses that go in there, and they'll be all different denominations, all different sexes. And for those who are saying we just want trotters, it will be for different gates also. We will have some pacers, we will have some trotters. And as I said to everybody out there, we have a pretty aggressive market. And for those of you who want to move your pacers, or your trotters for that matter, it shouldn't really be that hard to do. If you look at what happened in Ohio, we've almost truly sold out of Ohio. I was able to keep a couple of shares because, you know, I want to be a part of Ohio too. But for the most part, a lot of those horses have sold out. So with that, that's what we're trying to do for Ontario. I think the buckets that we landed on was 250,000 Canadian and 75,000 Canadian for obvious reasons. We want to make sure that people, for all financial backgrounds and present situations, get the ability to be a part of Ontario with us, and I think you can. For those particular prices. So many of you noticed, I saw there was some bucket lots sold already. For those of you who want to be involved, they are up now. I'll continue to talk about them. We'll continue to populate them as we go along. For those of you asking, what are we doing tomorrow at Winback? We'll be present. Are we going to buy any? There's a couple that we're looking at. I'll go to the sale early. Actually, now that I think of it, you probably... When are you planning on leaving Canada?
Monday morning.
So why don't we pop out to the sale tomorrow and look at some babies? So that's what we'll do tomorrow. Now, that is the Ontario buckets. We have everything else going on. We have the races tonight. We have races all throughout the week. Next Saturday, we're racing at least one in the $300,000 final in Dayton, and then it'll be full speed ahead through Lexington. So with that, I'll let you guys go. I know I turned a 2-minute explanation into a 10-minute video. I'm good at that, aren't I?
Yeah, very good.
I'll let you guys go, but I did want to take time to explain our position, explain what's going on with the sales this fall, explain what is going on with the buckets, and more particularly the Ontario buckets. So with that, I'll let you go. If you have any questions, you all know how to get a hold of me. Take care.